Hi there and welcome to the Byline podcast on Byline TV from the Byline Times. This episode being recorded at the Byline Festival at Keele University. My name's Adrian Goldberg and with me is Kate Raworth. Kate is the author of a book called Donut Economics, a rare economics bestseller. But here's the thing, here at the Byline Festival, she's also been performing for the first time the Donut Economics Circus. It was great fun as well. I'll talk in detail about that with Kate shortly. But first, Kate, for people who don't know donut economics, and I should tell you that apart from The Wealth of Nations by Adam Smith, it is, I think, the only book about economics that I've actually paid good money for. For people who don't know it, just explain the concept of donut economics.
The concept is this. I think we need economics that's fit for our times, for the 21st century. And it's not going to go well if we keep using theories that were cooked up in the 20th or even the 19th century. So we need to start now. And we need to start with a purpose. What is the economy trying to achieve? What is it for? Mainstream economics never gave us that. And so we end up chasing growth. And that doesn't end well. So donut economics starts with a vision of a thriving good life. And it looks like a donut, kind with a hole in the middle. So if you think of the donut with a hole in the middle and you think of humanity using Earth's resources, radiating out from the very center all the way out, basically, you want to leave no one in the hole in the middle of the donut. That's where people are falling short on the essentials of life, and they don't have the food, water, health, education, housing that everyone needs to lead a good life. Leave no one in the hole. But collectively, we can't overshoot the outer crust, because there we put so much pressure on the life support systems of this planet that we will kick our planet out of balance. So, leave no one in the hole. Don't overshoot Earth's limits. We've got to meet the needs of all people within the means of the living planet. That's the donut. And then the economics is, well, what kind of mindset would you actually want to be teaching today's students? Would you want today's politicians and economists to be putting into practice if we were going to have even half a chance of achieving that goal? And it's not at all the mindset that we inherited from the 20th century.
No, and the traditional view of economics, whichever way you cook it, whether you go through Keynesianism, whether you go through monetarism, ultimately it is about generating money, about growing your GDP, your gross domestic product. It's what Rachel Reeves, the Iron Chancellor, is currently obsessed with. And you're saying that's all wrong.
I'm absolutely saying that measuring the monetary value of goods and services sold in the economy year on year is going to tell you far too little about whether people are thriving and whether we're living within the life support systems of our planet. Because much of the stuff, as we know, much of the stuff that actually matters, whether it's care in the community or a stable climate, it doesn't show up in prices, and therefore it's not even reflected in GDP. In fact, a lot of GDP is earned at the very cost of social cohesion. It creates inequality, it destabilizes the climate, it kills biodiversity. So we need to leave behind outdated metrics and measure life in the metrics that actually matter. Are people thriving? Is the planet thriving? I wish our Chancellor and Prime Ministers and governments around the world were held to account by their people year on year around those metrics. Are you meeting the needs of all people? Are you coming closer, fast enough to live within the means of the planet? That is the measure of successful government this century.
You sound like a very reasonable, albeit very impassioned person. What you're saying, though, is the stuff of revolution, because it blows up our conventional model of economics.
And yet when I talk about this with vast majority of people, they say, well, that's common sense. And they often say, you know what, economics never made sense to me. And I always thought there was something wrong with me. But now I've read Donut Economics, I realise actually there's something wrong with economics, because this just makes sense. Because mainstream economics started in the theoretical heads of the founding fathers, and they were fathers, of economics who wanted to make it like a science. They had physics envy. They ignored the living planet. They ignored unpaired caring work. They overly emphasized the market. They turned it into neoliberalism. It's a string of theories that's cooked up actually to serve the current system. And it's not grounded. It's not even grounded on Earth. There's no planet in mainstream economics. It's extraordinary. They call damage to the planet an environmental externality. Well, if aliens wanted to take us down, they would convince us to talk about the degradation of our Mother Earth as an environmental externality, and we'd do the damage ourselves. So this is common sense grounded on the planet in 21st century realities. Is it a revolution? It's certainly a paradigm change, and it calls for a very, very different kind of economic thinking and practice.
Yeah, I love the phrase. Somebody once told me that common sense ain't common. But talk me through then the metrics that you think we should be prioritising rather than GDP.
So back in the 1930s, Simon Kuznets in the US, brilliant young economist, was asked by US Congress to come up with a single number to measure the output of the American economy. Very understandable why they wanted it. They'd had the Wall Street crash. What the heck just happened there? And then he measured it. He added up tons of steel and tons of wheat, and he figured out a way of creating a single measure. He also gave a big caveat, and he said this could scarcely tell us the welfare of a nation. He knew that it measured the price of timber, but not the loss of the forest and the value of that. It didn't measure the value of community. It didn't measure work in the home. So he was fully aware of the shortage of this number. But the temptation of that single number, to compare a country year on year, to compare one country against the other, it makes great headlines, simplicity. We are living in an utterly different era. And if Simon Kuznets were alive today, I have zero doubt that he would say, people, what are you doing? I made that up in the 1930s. There was almost no data. You are swimming in data. The vast majority of people in the world have a mobile phone in their pocket. You could actually find out about their health, their well-being, their education. You can find out from people the human data of life. We can measure the earth breathing. We can measure biodiversity loss and climate change in real time. We're in the middle of a data revolution. So I'm sure he would say, use a dashboard of metrics and measure life in its own terms. And we can visualize it, as I do with the donut, because we can then use our eyes to see a far richer picture than somebody telling you GDP grew by 2% or shrank by 0.5%. I mean, was that an oil spill? Was that divorce? Was that investing in schools? Was that building new buildings or retrofitting old ones? It matters what the money is generated in the name of.
And the oil spill and the divorce would be generators of positive GDP.
It adds to GDP. Wonderful, yeah. Yeah, you have an oil spill, you've got to clean it up. You know, it generates money, lots of jobs, cleaning up the ocean. So it's a really perverse way of saying this is the kind of economic activity that we want.
Yeah, you've mentioned that we have that data there, though. I'm just going to press you on this.
Yeah.
What are the 3 or 4 key data for you then that we should be prioritising?
Well, let's come close to home. So are we or are we not coming back within our means of our carbon emissions? We, as the UK, are one of the countries among many that have been emitting far too much carbon dioxide historically and far more than our global fair share. So we need to massively reduce. And that is, of course, being monitored. Interestingly, the Climate Change Committee say, yeah, we are reducing it, but not fast enough. And actually what the Climate Change Committee here in the UK have said is the single priority we have is we want electricity to become cheaper than coal and gas. So actually that's what we should be monitoring. Are we or are we not going through an energy transition? I would love our government to actually have to report on what policies they're making and what's happening in terms of flipping so that the price of electricity is cheaper than the price of gas. And then the energy transition starts to take care of itself. So we need to measure the metrics that actually tell us about whether we're shifting the system or not. I think we need to really pay attention socially to the scale of inequalities. We know that the UK is one of the most unequal amongst high-income countries, amongst the OECD and our European neighbours. Are we or are we not reducing the level of inequality in our society? Because we all know there are huge knock-on effects of social lack of cohesion. The inequality creates distance. It's not good for anybody to live in a highly unequal society. So again, let's look at the change in the inequalities between us. But when we come down to local places, different places might have different priorities. Some might say people are living literally in food poverty and energy poverty. So we can turn our attention to locally relevant metrics that are available today.
So it's a more decentralised model. As you've explained, it isn't purely a pro-environmental model because, as you say, it would address inequality as well. But
it's exactly about both the social and the environmental. I think that's why people have been really drawn to it. It invites you to care, it requires you to care about both at the same time.
But the environment is clearly a key part of it, isn't it? And
yes.
I'll mention again your donut economics circus, which I just watched and was great fun. But in that, you have one member of the audience acting as global finance, and you have another member of the audience acting out Mother Nature. And it's just to, I suppose, just to bring to life these concept,
Yeah.
but the extractive nature of global finance, was it something like £7 trillion has been invested in things which will, one way or the other, destroy the planet?
Yeah, so one of the stats at the heart of the circus is that in 2022, and this is a stat that's been celebrated in the world of finance, global finance invested $200 billion in what's called nature positive investments.
So you hear that figure and you think,
wow,
well done,
$200 billion in sequestering carbon, switching to renewable energy, rewilding, restoring.
Yeah.
But you think, wow. But then the other half of the story is that at the same time as that 200 billion, finance has invested 7 trillion in nature degrading, depleting, destroying activity, fossil fuel exploration, mining, degradation, pollution. So for every $1 that's nature, so-called nature positive, $3,000 are undermining nature. So we are puffing in the wind here. We need a massive transition, not just of finance that actually cares about nature, but the entire financial system needs to be transformed so that it stops destroying the conditions for life on Earth.
Is donut economics the same as zero growth economics?
No. Because donut economics focuses like a laser on, are we or are we not meeting the needs of all people? Are we coming back within the means of the life support systems of Earth? This is what ultimately matters. And what we need to do is end our structural dependence on endless growth, right? We have inherited economies, I think thanks to 100 years of fossil fuel boom, which made it seem like growth just seemed like the normal natural condition because cheap energy was just everywhere. It's like we've been on an up escalator for a century and you think it's just normal. It'll always go up. And so we build in structural dependence, how we'll pay for our pensions, how we'll pay off our debt, how we'll settle our trade deficit. Growth will come and we'll be able to pay. So we build in that expectation. We need to end that structural dependence on endless growth. Let me put it this way. We have inherited economies that need to grow, whether or not that makes us thrive. And right now it's not making us thrive. And what we need are economies that make us thrive, whether or not they grow. So it's not zero growth. It's not stop growth. That would be absurd. It's make the economy thrive and enable GDP. It needs to be able to adapt to bring us back within planetary boundaries and meet the needs of all people. And I think it needs to be able to, sometimes it'll go up a bit, sometimes it might oscillate. I think some countries will need to go through a contraction of GDP to come back within planetary boundaries. But it's not a fixation on zero growth. We're prioritizing something else.
Yeah, so GDP will, in a sense, be what GDP will.
I love that. Yes.
You've taken donut economics then onto the stage as the donut economics circus. And the book was a bestseller. The book did really well for you. So why are you now dressing in a top hat with a feather and handing out swimming pool noodles and strange dresses to members of the audience?
So I wrote that book as an act of advocacy. I wrote that book because I want to transform economics. And the place that has had least impact probably is in economics departments. There's extreme resistance to transformation because it's paradigm change. It's been picked up in almost every other university discipline, in medicine, in law, in urban design, in architecture, in engineering, in business, in government. But I'm an advocate. I want to see change in the world. So I wrote a book because that at that moment was the most effective piece of advocacy I could do. I drew the donut now 13 years ago. So it's now a teenager. I've been talking about it for 13 years. I wrote a book that came out 7 or 8 years ago. And I'm continually giving lectures, teaching on panels, discussions. So I continue to do that. But I really think it's important to find new and different ways to communicate. And in times that become more and more desperate, I think it's really important to harness humor, to harness the trickster, to harness play, right? Because these issues are challenging. And I want people to be able to come, as we say here, discuss, debate, and laugh and dance. So we can have a laugh. And sometimes when you use humor, you can say things that you otherwise wouldn't say. You can go deeper and actually touch much, much deeper values. We had people in the circus there talking about greed, the extractivism of finance. We're going deep in a playful way that actually takes us quite quickly into what really matters. The other reason is I just have a hell of a lot of fun when I do the circus. So I'm massively enjoying myself. I see people light up, come up on stage. I don't know who's going to come up and juggle or do the hula hoop and play nature and finance. And it's this joyous, spontaneous creation that gives me a great thrill.
You talk about the ways in which various intellectual disciplines, academic disciplines have taken on some of the principles of donut economics. Have any politicians, have any jurisdictions, any towns or cities or regions adopted the principles of donut economics?
I'm so delighted to tell you, absolutely yes. In 2019, the city of Amsterdam was the first city, local government, let's say, in the world to put the donut at the centre of its strategy to become a circular city by 2050. And they used the donut as the driving concept around which they were going to build their policy of circularity.
So a circular city in terms of recycling?
Yes, reusing materials, not knocking down any buildings, but deconstructing and reusing, or ideally refurbishing and retrofitting. So using materials again and again, thinking about, nothing is thrown away, there is no way. So how are we going to be materially efficient? They're also banning all fossil fuel vehicles, boats and cars from the city by 2030. So they're really going for a far more transformative city. And the donut is the driving concept at the heart of it. 6 weeks later, the city of Copenhagen, also a cool European city, wanting to keep up with its cool rival, voted by a massive majority to look at what it would look like for Copenhagen to live within the donut. Then Brussels, then Barcelona. There are now 50 towns, cities, districts, states, provinces around the world, from Ipoh in Malaysia to Thimphu in Bhutan to Glasgow in Scotland, that have taken the donut and publicly put it at the heart of their strategies and their policies and their processes. And there's another 50 that are experimenting with it behind the scenes. They haven't gone public, but they're asking themselves. So it's absolutely been picked up and taken on by towns and cities all around the world, really showing the power of peer-to-peer inspiration. It's seeing mayors and councillors like themselves, people like yourself, doing that thing that you thought was impossible, but there's someone just like you already doing that. And we see that ripple. So at Donut Economics Action Lab, we're committed to working with these places, to amplifying their stories, to bringing them together, connecting them so they can learn from each other and spreading this practice. So local government just getting on and doing a new kind of government that centres human thriving and planetary thriving.
I love your passion. I love your enthusiasm. Our current Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, has defined herself and her government by the amount of growth as measured by GDP that she will achieve within the lifetime of this Parliament. Mm-hmm. And that is the paradigm within which she will be judged, not only by herself, but by newspapers, mainstream radio and television, and by her political peers. What chance of getting into the head of Rachel Reeves? I
think it's an incredibly unfortunate choice of mission that the government set themselves. Not just growth, but to say that they wanted to be the fastest growing country in the G7. I mean, talk about setting a goal over which you actually don't have control. It's a mission that's so out of step with the times. It was in 1960 that John F. Kennedy ran for his presidential election on the promise of growth. We're not in the 60s anymore. We know far too much. And actually go door to door. I've never spoken to people in community meetings who say, you know what I really want in this country? I really want growth. No, people want good jobs. They want a good future for their kids. They want their kids to go to a good school and get to school safely, breathe clean air. They want to feel they belong in their community. They want to feel they live in a place that's thriving. That is not the same as just driving growth by dismantling environmental regulations so that we build, so that we get GDP rising. I think it's really misguided, and I'm really heartbroken that this Labour government has taken such an outdated approach to the economic transformation we need. So I warmly welcome Rachel Reeves to the circus.
Well, she may already be surrounded by a few clowns in the eyes of some. Kate, thank you very much indeed. That's Kate Raworth, who is the author of Donut Economics, which you can buy, of course. It is a book, but you can also, at certain locations, see the Donut Economics Circus. And if you get the chance to do it, I would recommend that you do so. I'm Adrian Goldberg. This has been an episode of the Byline podcast on Byline TV, recorded at the Byline Festival at Keele University in a little room which isn't quite as soundproof as we hoped, which is why you might be able to hear the sound of some guys playing pool just outside. I hope that hasn't affected your pleasure too much. My thanks to Sean Byrne-Roberts for his production assistance on this episode. We'll see you again very soon. Thanks for listening and for watching. Cheers now. Bye-bye.